A few people said they wanted a little more help with drawing eyes. So here's a little more direction for drawing eyes. So you can just draw along with me. You can also pull up a photo of an eye because it would help to be looking at something maybe. But to start thinking about how an eye is made, well, I want to have a pencil with an eraser to start with. Just in general, with all your drawings, start everything really lightly because you're gonna have stuff to erase. So really lightly draw a circle. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger because this circle is the whole ball. This is the whole eyeball. So if you think about it, your eye is a sphere that is set inside of your ocular cavity. So you're not seeing the entire ball, but it has that shape to it, that sort of like convex shape, because what the part that you're seeing on your eyelid is part of that ball. So start with that circle that's a little bigger, and that's going to be the eyeball itself. Then in the middle, so we're not going to see this whole circle in the end. I might draw a little bit darker just so you can see it on the camera, but you don't want to draw real dark because you're going to be erasing parts of this. Okay, so then in the middle of that, you have the iris. So the iris is the part of your eye that is brown or green or hazel or blue or gray, or it's the part of your eye that is a color, and it's a muscle that sort of contracts and releases. And in the center of that is the black, in the center of your iris is the black part of your eye, the pupil, which the pupil is, it's right in the center of the iris. You know, it can be bigger or smaller depending on whether it is, whether it's dilated, more or less dilated, depending on how much light is in the room. You know, it's going to get bigger if you're in dimmer light and smaller if you're in brighter light. And then over top of that is the eyelid. So if you look in the mirror, or if you look at, you know, a person or a picture of an eye, there's kind of a curved line that makes the top eyelid, and it goes over part of the iris, or part of the color part of the eye. So you're going to have that curved line. Everyone's eyelids are shaped a little different, so you want to make sure you're looking at the picture that you're working from, or, you know, at yourself in the mirror, because it's not going to be the same exact shape. It depends on the person, how much it arches, how much of the eyelid you see on that person. And then the bottom lid, it comes to the end. You know, the bottom lid and the top lid meet on this side, right by the end of the eyeball. On the bottom, you know, it doesn't cover, the bottom lid doesn't really cover much of the iris, just a little tiny bit of it. And then it kind of meets over here. It meets a little bit past the end of the eyeball, because this part is your tear duct that's on the inside of the eye. Okay, so you have that sort of curve there for your tear duct. Then you have the top lid of the eye. Again, you need to look at the individual that you're drawing. So here's my top lid. It's going to be a curve, but the shape of that curve depends on the person, right? And then I'm going to go back and erase, now that I have this much, and then I have my tear duct, a little bit of that bottom lid, then I can go back and erase this part of the iris because you're not going to see it through the eyelid. And I'm going to go back and erase the eyeball. But that just kind of gives you an idea of the general structure. And then when you start looking at the values there, I'm going to change the shape a little bit, kind of play with it. But that's the general idea. And then you can start, you're going to have a highlight somewhere because it's, there's generally a shiny spot. Maybe it's in the middle of the iris. Maybe I'm going to switch to a darker pencil. Or sorry, in the pupil, I mean. The pupil is actually a hole in the center. I mean, the cornea covers it like a lens, but it's kind of like the lens of a camera, that opens the aperture to let more light in. So it's kind of a hole that opens when you need to, opens more, so it looks bigger when you need to let more light in, and closes down more, it gets smaller when you don't need to let as much light in. But there's usually a highlight in the middle. The iris is usually a little darker at the edges. And, what it looks like exactly in terms of the pattern depends on the individual. So you have to look at the person whose eyes you're drawing, and also how dark or light the color of their iris is. But it's not going to be the white of the paper. So you can even use your blending stump here a little bit to smooth out that value. And then oftentimes it's sort of like a starburst pattern in there almost. You can kind of use your tip of your pencil to make that. But again, it depends on the individual person that you're drawing. And then how someone looks too, when you get into the details around their eyes, it depends on if they're wearing makeup, if they're wearing mascara, their eyelashes are going to look different, or if they have on, fake eyelashes. And then there's also going to be, because your eye is a ball, right? This part in here is going to be a little bit darker. Well, it's a little darker here where like the tear duct is. But if you think of like the shape of a ball, this is kind of like shading a sphere. Like it's going to be a little bit darker at each of these edges because your eye curves out. Like the eye itself is convex surface, like a ball or a sphere. So it's going to be a little bit darker at the edges. So I could shade it like that. I could use my blending stump a little bit. It's also going to be, your eyelid is casting a little bit of a shadow on the eye itself because it's underneath it. So, it's a little darker right under that lid too. And you can also, if you don't have you don't have your blending stump, you can't find it, you can also try for parts on the skin that you might want to, use a little bit of value and blend it some. You can also blend with a Q-tip if you don't have a blending stump. So kind of set back into your eye. So here's the back part of the lid is going to be kind of a shadow. And then, it's going to look a little different if someone's literally wearing eyeshadow or some kind of makeup too. But it's not just a line, it's a shadow because it's kind of set back in there. And then thinking about eyelashes. You know, it's going to look a little different if someone's wearing eyeliner too. But eyelashes, so they're not just going to stick straight up like this. I saw a few eyelashes that just look like straight lines, like sticks. So your eyelashes don't look like that. They kind of curve. They're not all the same exact line. You want to have your pencil sharp. So your eyelashes, they're a little thicker at the base, but they're still not a real thick line. So I'm kind of moving my pencil in a way that they're a little thicker at the base, and then I'm kind of like letting up a little bit as you come further out. And near the top, they're actually going to look probably a little shorter because they're kind of coming more out at you. And then you have, you see a little bit of that bottom lid, and the bottom lashes. So I'm kind of using my pencil on the edge where it's thicker, closer to the lid, and then, getting down to just the tip of the pencil towards the end where I want it a little bit thinner. And then lastly, to add an eyebrow, your brow ridge is, your eyebrow is going to go kind of along your brow ridge. So if this is, here's the edge of your nose, and it kind of goes up to your brow ridge that's above your ocular cavity that your eye is set back into. So it's going to be, if your nose is, wherever the nose comes up, it's going to sort of continue into the shape of the brow. So you can put in lightly the general shape of that eyebrow, but it's not going to be a solid line. They're made of hair, so you want to look at the person and look at, firstly, how dark or light their eyebrow is, and maybe put in that general value. Like whenever you're doing hair, if you kind of do the general value and then go back and add individual hairs, it's a little easier. And then you can kind of go back and looking at, whatever image you're looking at, or if you're looking in a mirror, and look at the individual hairs and kind of the direction that they're going and the shape of the brow. Again, you want to be looking at, whatever individual you're looking at, because these are general characteristics, but, the individual shapes are different for everyone, and it's what makes a portrait look like a particular individual is getting those little distinct differences.